What are your like first reactions on the film?
Right, I saw the movie in Tallinn Dark Night Film Festival, Black Nights. So it was a dark morning, and it's a neo film noir kind of action thriller. It was interesting. I mean, that at the first, that was nothing new, as we speak like a neo noir thriller, but. What I thought it's a movement and style and action, visually stunning. That's what I thought. But afterwards, it's long. I agree with you. There are not very, there's a lack of human, presence. So afterwards, you just go deep into other stories. But yeah, it's actually not that too long. It's time consuming. And also says they based on true events, something kind of thing. So you can imagine it can happen everywhere. It does happen everywhere. So but at the end, what struck me, we could talk about later, but maybe you should warn me, that I found myself that the main joke in the movie, that two working class hitmen versus good cops in a bad town. So that's, all the corruption and poverty and everything else was a side job. But when you strip down all the, stylish cinema shots, it's actually poor guys versus poor guys, even if you're a killer or not. So everything else is just this collateral damage. And please, you go ahead. I talk too much.
No,
No, thank you, Essin.
Yeah. Well, my view is, of course, a bit affected by the fact that I'm also a festival programmer, and I've been watching Filipino films for over, a decade plus. And what I like about this film is basically like there's a real tradition of like Filipino cinema that basically like go into this kind of like this kind of neo-reality, in that basically like it uses these kind of shaky handheld going through the slums, and to basically kind of portray a certain starkness to basically like the lives of like the poor people in the Philippines. And it started basically back in 2004 2005 with Jeffrey Jaturian's The Debt Collector, and another director, Briante Mendoza. You might be familiar with him. And basically he started with films like Slingshot and all these things. And some of the aesthetics that you see in On the Job is in a lot of ways an evolution of those kinds of aesthetics, basically from those very indie early era of DV films to this kind of like much more polished, much more genre kind of like led aesthetics. And the fact is, people would be surprised, but the Philippines has extremely few real action films, or basically real kind of like like thriller genre films. I mean, there are quite a lot of horror films, but they're quite okay. But the thing is, like the fact that they managed to basically make something that is quite, to be honest, like quite professional and slick, I think it's a good evolution. Although, of course, the subject matter is something that basically we've all seen before. It does reflect a lot of what is going on in the Philippines. I've been there many times. I've had a friend, a film critic who was shot 6 times and he died, and he's Filipino. Yeah. So basically, it is a country that's extremely violent, and it is very unsafe. They always tell me after 2:00 a.m. do not take a taxi because you might end up dead. It's just not a very safe kind of place. You just have to have somebody drive you. Yeah. So I mean, there is a lot of it that actually you would be surprised that it is actually quite realistic. The amount of corruption, the amount of like poverty that goes into the film, maybe even more. But but the thing is, like, as a pure genre exercise, I think basically like it's not something that we haven't seen before. The story, as somebody very nicely pointed out, the role of women in the film, which is basically non-existent and basically quite cliched. But I hope that basically in some ways this will lead to a kind of like more critical thought, and also like more refinement as like Filipino cinema, especially genre cinema, grows.
Okay, Meinolf.
Well, I don't know the Philippines personally, but so the film for me was quite exotic in a way. Thinking about all these prison scenes where the people just go in and out like it would be, I don't know what. And outside of the genre traditions which he's trying to follow, the film offered kind of an insight in parts of the Philippine society where where corruption is part of the daily life and violence, yes, is part of the daily life, it seems. And somebody mentioned too long. Yes, the film is too long, indeed. I mean, if I would have been the producer of the film, or co-producer of the film would have been cut down 20 minutes at least. And in a way, it's you're right, Raymond. It's in a way, it's in a traditional Philippine cinema as far as I know it, and the mixture of amateurish kind of treating stories and handling the camera and everything, and on the same time looking out for more Western cinema standards, but not yet there. So in the end, for me, it creates a kind of feeling of an exotic film.
Okay.
Exotic because it's, you know, it's serving itself, it's trying to serve a certain, a genre.
We get back to that later. Dennis and I are definitely not neutral, even though some film critics pretend to be, that they're very objective. So we'll also be kind of asking each other questions, and also we'll be probably answering your questions.
Maybe.
And I'm sure that one of the questions that is on all your minds is, Dennis, why is this film in the Critics' Week?
Well, many critics tend to be associated with kind of an elitist taste, and some of them even have it and kind of try to defend it. But yeah, I think it's very important to play around a little bit with the image of a critic. What are we actually doing, and how are we considering ourselves and what we are doing? And just showing a very entertaining film, which I think is the case with this film, is fun to do in the first place. It's fun to watch this film together and discuss it. And you don't have to like have a university degree to just approach this film. It's fun to see it, and it's accessible for a lot of people. So we put it in, and first of all, of course, it's also a good film. I think it's a very exciting film, and although it's a bit too long, yeah, I agree. But yeah, everybody has his weaknesses, and every film has its weaknesses. I think we can talk about that later as well. We also screen some romantic comedies on one of the other nights by Johnny To. So I think we were just trying to set up a nice mixture. And for me, Eric Maty was also a black mark on my land map. Like, I did not know any film of his. And here in the West, I would say most people never heard of this person. Although he's like super vivid. He's producing, he's acting, he's directing. Like, yeah, it's very exciting. So later on, we should hear a little bit about him. Dana, I mean, what was your impression?
I saw the film in the worst of circumstances in 3 separate sittings, but that also gave me the chance to go back every now and then and try to reconstruct the narrative, because that was also a bit confusing and too funky for me, because I tend to get taken away by fast pace and editing, and I lose my mind and I want to dance. And also, I agree very much with the 2 comments from the audience about gender stereotypes and where were the women. I mean, when we saw Madame Thelma appear first in the film, I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting, a bit cliche, but anyhow, I don't mind the blonde-wigged, sunglassed, mysterious, bad woman behind it all, but it stayed very shallow, and the other women were just girlfriends and mothers and daughters and the usual victims. And I would think that in an intelligent genre film nowadays, you would be a bit more transgressive, but I think the transgression of this film definitely lies in other parts of the film. So before we get to that, I would like to go back to Raymond, because you're more familiar with Eric Maty and his work. So could you give a bit of information about who he is?
Yeah, I mean, like, because I also program for the Hong Kong International Film Festival, and actually we've had Eric there before. Although, to be honest, I forgot his last film that we programmed. I mean, I've seen it, of course, but I have to check really quickly, but I don't. Anyway, so we had him over there, and, you know, like the last film he did is very, very different. It's about this man who basically is trying to commit suicide. It's kind of like black comedy-ish. And the thing about Eric Maty is that he's very much a commercial director in the Philippines. He works for a company called Star Cinema that you saw the logo. Star Cinema is a completely commercial like like basically like they do only commercial films. They don't do art house. They're not interested in that. But Eric Mati is somebody that I always thought was a little bit different from everyone, because the way he shoots things and the way he directs them is quite unusual for even for like a Filipino, art house films, because he does very different things. And one of the things that the Philippines always lacks is, of course, unfortunately, money and time. So a lot of indie filmmakers tend to rush their films. But Eric basically likes to take his time, and he likes to basically imbue it with a little bit of like flair, which I always thought was very interesting. And so basically to me, he's not somebody new, and he's made 20, 30 films already. I mean, like, he's been around for quite a while. But the thing is, this is the first time that basically kind of got to a broader audience, especially outside the Philippines. I mean, this film was in Cannes. I mean, that basically was already quite surprised, because usually Cannes doesn't show such a pure genre film, but it was. And I think it's a good thing for him, because it allows him to also basically kind of evolve and develop from there. Because I mean, the last film, I really apologize, I just totally forgot the name of it. To this film, there's already a big kind of like a development. So I'm hoping that basically the next one will be even better. So I think that for a commercial director to basically like push himself in different ways, I think it's actually a great thing. And also for the Philippines, where honestly the commercial films are really shit.
And I would like to ask Reinhold a bit about the genre. I mean, if you had to do like a quick course in genre filmmaking, what are the typical genre things in this film, and where does it divert or transgress those?
Well, typical genre things are the bad guys and the good guys, of course, and what's missing are the femme fatale, in a way. I mean, we just see her with the cigarette and the wig, in a way. If this woman in this SUV, so he's playing with the typical stereotypes. The older gangster, the younger gangster. The apprentice and the cops who try to maintain a certain dignity in a world full of corruption, and with the goal, to bring down this corrupt general. So these are elements, characters which you find in genre movies. Where he's different, I think it's what makes maybe a difference is how it's linked to the reality of the Philippines. As far as I would guess, I don't know the Philippines, but I think that makes a difference in a way. Not the camera work or something. This is like copying Western movies, and but playing with certain stereotypes of genres, and genres is usually living through its stereotypes, makes a film different and interesting. And the films I have been involved, co-produced genre films, I mean, you don't think that of Arte, but we did and we do, are different in a way. And that is when I'm reading scripts, when I'm looking for projects, it's where is the difference, where it's not a typical in German krimi or something. It's not a typical gangster movie. It's the nuance, the tones in between. Where it's a little alienation, and that is what we are looking for, and that is what that film sort of offers. It's a bit amateurish, but in my taste. But yes, it's an interesting film in that aspect.
Could you give a striking example of one of those kind of differences in this film, just to kind of reawake our memory?
Yeah, for example, the older guy, Tang, is his name, when he goes home somehow, and these scenes with his daughter, that is something quite different. That bald-headed guy, the father of the policeman's daughter, being part of the elite, but still has some conscience what's going wrong. So these are moments where the film, I think it's different, and the rest is just craft, the shooting and the chasing, and that's normal stuff in a genre. But it's more like it's in the characters, also that the main character, on the police side, this young colonel, that he is taking it very personally what he sees there and what he witnesses there. So, yeah, these are differences.
I know you wrote an encyclopedia of genre of criminal films, including 400 films ranging from 1900 till the 90s. If you expanded this work, would you include this one actually?
Well, till the 80s, I think that was when I was a student, so I wrote the book. And yeah, maybe. The book I wrote was about, genres within the genre of crime movies. So yes, I would most likely take it as a, cop film, for example.
Actually, I have just a comment. Who mentioned Metro Manila? I can talk a lot about what problems I have with that film because there's a certain part of Filipino cinema which is very sensitive, and we have a word for it. It's called poverty porn. It's when people go inside to shoot something like slums because it's exotic. And there are also Filipino directors who do that. I will also not name names. These films win at festivals. I mean, but Metro Manila is actually shot by a white person, which to me makes it even worse. I mean, that doesn't mean that basically you have to be Asian or Filipino to do it, because, like I said, Filipinos do the same thing. Because I know this director. He's 21 years old. He was very rich, and he made a film. It won at big festivals, and he constructed the whole thing. He never went to the slums, but it fooled a lot of people. And I have a bit of a problem with these kinds of things. I call it poverty porn, and to me, that's the worst excess of sometimes how Western people view Asian films, and basically like exotic African or South American films, where basically they say, "Oh, look at these poor people." That's something I really do take an offense with. So sorry, I had to talk about that for a little bit.
Did you think this film was exploiting the subject of poverty?
No, because basically this film is completely not realistic. It's not it touches upon certain things that is real, but I mean, like, of course, it's not, the reality is not that corrupt, you know what I mean? So a lot of it is basically kind of like, like, it's just kind of like very heightened, like kind of, how noir is like hyper real. This is kind of like also like a kind of hyper real kind of crime film, and it's not supposed to be, it doesn't try to exoticize it. It just basically says that basically this is how they live. And for me, because I've been to the Philippines at least like 7-8 times, like, I mean, there is a real amount of danger and a lot of like, like poverty there. That's very true. But at least, like, I mean, the way that he does it, basically he knows that this is very much within the world of like kind of like pulp crime. He's not trying to basically make something that seems realistic and basically like kind of like that shows pity upon these poor people. That kind of thing, which really bothers me.
So before we go to Essen's interpretation of the film, which is also a bit more sociological, we would also like to ask you, the audience, a question about your expectations. Why did you come and see this film, except that you wanted to do something different tonight or just have some excitement? But were you attracted by the fact that it's a genre film?
Or did you just come to the Critics Week because you heard about it?
Which is also good, just trust us. But
Sure.
Was it a reason to come because you knew it was a genre film? Or any other reasons at all? I think there's a microphone for the audience. So if
Yeah, we have a microphone. Yeah. Speak up. Was it a friend's recommendation? Do you regret it?
No, we shouldn't be asking that. I mean,
Wrong.
so nobody wants to. Yeah, please.
Especially came because, of course, Dennis invited me to come.
That's always a good
And,
reason.
So therefore, I really wanted to know, okay, what's going on here, and what will they show here as a critic's choice? And therefore, I'm here, and I think I just want to mention one thing. I don't think it's too long. I would like to say that. I'm sorry if I just changed the subject here, but I don't think it's too long, because that's what we were mentioning before. Like a genre film should have these or that aspects. And I think because it developed so much character as well in between life, what they're leading, I think it had the right pace and actually as well the right time. Yeah, as well. And that's why. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Want? Yes, please.
I'm here especially because it's a genre film, and I love genre films from Asia. And what I think is special about them is that you see both sides equally, the police side and the robbers, and that you feel with both sides, and that apart from the chases and from the action, which is quite unique to Asian cinema, Hong Kong cinema, or recent Korean cinema. So these are the films that I like in Panorama and Forum. I really love, and what I'm missing this year, and that's why I'm here. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Any other people who just came for the genre? Because we also want to explore a little bit what function genre can have actually in kind of transmitting ideas.
There is a quasi-genre film from Thailand called The Blue Hour in a Panorama. It's quasi-horror. It can get quite creepy. If you're interested, you should try to watch that. I've seen it before already.
Always great to have recommendations going on. So maybe we should go back to Essen now, because yeah, you were talking about the corruption, and of course we've been talking a bit about the film before, and you had more of a sociological approach to the film. So could you talk a bit about that?
I mean, I don't believe, or I should say, I don't buy the idea of that the genre films are less able to show the reality in a deeper level than art movies. So there are good movies, bad movies. Genre movies, of course, describe the world of the corruption and poverty in a really good sense. So in that movie, when, as he emphasized, when the camera, when the director follows the working class hitman's private life, I should say, when the action, stylish, polished, all shots are away, you have some kind of idea. So yes, of course, it's same all over the world. It's the same. The corruption in the countries like mine, I should say, you could see on the surface. I'm sure you do have some, of course, corruptions, but in the countries like Turkey, where I live, you could see on the surface. What you don't see, the violence, like in Philippines, which is because we don't have it in the cities. We don't have urban violence. Istanbul is one of the safest cities. But what we have violence, where we have violence is, on the civil war. We are having a civil war still. I mean, unfortunately, in the southeast part of Turkey with the Kurds and the Turks. So anyway, what I see is the genre is actually, it's a mirror of it somehow. When I see this movie, I don't say, okay, I read like a history book of about the Philippines, but it's a quite impressive in a way. I don't know, it is just strikes me. It's what also strikes me that we don't have a genre movies in Turkey. Maybe,
I was just going to ask you, I mean, does the situation in your country translate into genre movies? So you're saying no, so why not?
Yeah, we don't. Actually, I don't understand. We do have some, we used to have like superhero type of movies, like really type B movies, but not anymore. Actually, we don't have movies like that. I mean, it's like, I don't mind it's stylish or polished, but at least you could just, confront with the violence a little bit. No, we don't. I mean, we don't even art house movies very much that deals with the corruption or poverty. So it's strange, really, in comparing with the, genre movies. As a Turkish, film critic, it's really strange, really. We don't have one.
Kind of. Do you think that you need specific conditions in a film culture for a genre cinema to arise?
Well, first, when we're talking about genre cinema here, now we're talking about gangster crime films or whatever, because I mean, science fiction is also a genre, for example. So, but talking about crime films, I think the good ones, like in the literature, they reflect the times they're made in and the society they're made in. That is the main issue. The rest is, when they're good. When they're bad, they're only speculative on violence, on, you know, superficial things like car chasing or whatever, or shootouts. No, they should reflect what's going on in society. Why is it not in Turkey? I don't know. Obviously, it's not a corrupt country. So, for example, and it's no problems. And in fact, I have done several films with Turkey and in Turkey, and they reflect problems of the society in different ways. So, and maybe it's also part of the budget, I don't know, part of the tradition. Interesting thing, I mean, I was on a film which kind of tried to come into that area of, you know, the shadow world. And but I think it has also to do with the financing of films in Turkey, for example, which is by the state, by the Minister of Culture. So I guess there's a certain censorship involved, you know. I guess that, you know, that makes it maybe difficult to make a film like, you know, combine action and some serious political comments of the society. Nowadays, it's very, you know, it's more like hidden. It's not so open. It's more refined, which is okay. And a crime film should be more, you know, more direct in a way. So I don't know the exact reasons.
You have second thoughts.
No,
I mean, that's, excuse me, on a different way. In another way, you don't find really sexuality in Turkish films. You know, like it's a kind of taboo, and you will have one which you co-produce.
Yeah, that's another topic. Actually, we should open up later. Sexuality and sexes in the. Yeah, I agree with some of your thoughts actually, but we do have like movies, big budget blockbusters, Turkish blockbuster movies, like, but only comedy, stupid, you know, it's just the mainstream comedies. Nobody wants to deal with the you know, it's action movies, but we do have also action movies, but they're all patriotic films. It's big budget, you know, it's like blockbusters, but all patriotic. They, you know, so.
Well, but how about Germany? Because Germany doesn't make a lot of genre films at all. So does that mean also there's not, you know?
No, Germany makes a lot of genre films, but they're only in TV nowadays. You know, and genre films in Germany don't really work in cinemas because, you know, you have every day on all the channels you have German TV crime dramas, you know, all the time. So and very, very, I mean, in this part of your program, there's one film which tries to catch up with that and maybe invent a kind of different approach to this genre, which is Lügen der Sieger, you know, the lies of the winners. And he tries, and the director wants to make genre films in a way. Well, he's gonna talk to you. I think he presents this film himself.
Christoph Hochhäusler will be there on Thursday.
But it's in cinemas they don't work. You know, they don't work out, only on TV.
Because the film that I saw was called Samurai last year, and that was actually like a most pure genre film from Germany I've seen in quite a while. So that's that's my idea of a genre film, but that to me was like a real, you know, surprise, because usually Germany doesn't make that kind of film.
We were mentioning the selection of Berlinale earlier. Did you guys notice that there is like a parallel festival going on during Berlinale called Genrenale? They are actually only screening German genre cinema. And there's two guys of the festival sitting over there. So maybe you want to join later and give a statement about your program or ideas of genre film. Just take this as an invitation. Yeah, I'm also wondering what's the situation here and why do they not travel so well into the cinema?
Because in Germany, as I said, TV took this genre over in a way. I mean, it's not just German films which doesn't really work in cinemas. It's like American films either. I mean, all this action. An intelligent genre film doesn't make any box office. Not good enough, you know. Despite some stars and something. No, compared to whatever science fiction, compared to romantic comedies, somehow.
Raymond has a different opinion, I think.
I don't know about that.
So.
No, please go on.
And for example, I mean, in Scandinavian country nowadays, we have all these crime series and films which work on German TV, excellent. But the movies, in terms of box office, are a disaster. I co-produced 3 films in Sweden called Snabba Cash or Easy Money, and they only the first one was distributed in Germany, in France not even, and the 2 others not at all, and it was commercially a disaster. We didn't broadcast them yet, but I'm sure compared to, you know, they're going to be quite a big success when we broadcast them on TV, because the audience in Germany obviously expect crime movies only on TV. They don't go to see it in the cinemas, you know, the general audience, not the specialists and the fans, of course. So, I don't know, it's strange.
So if that's the situation in Germany, that genre cinema has kind of found another outlet on television, but you still co-produce these kind of films for the festival circuit, or
hopefully for the commercial circuit as well, and because they're different. I mean, this series or the trilogy, Snabba Cash has an interesting concept. Yes, it's based on novels, like, I mean, all the films, but that's also a commercial thing. You know, nowadays in this area, you need to have a novel, best-selling novel. But the idea was more than that. You know, it's located in this. I don't know. Well, you haven't seen the film because, you know, the first one flopped in Germany, so the other ones weren't released. So
they were released in Holland.
Yeah, in Holland maybe.
I know, we're a strange country.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's interesting films because, you know, nowadays society deals with immigrants. It's only in the more or less only in the area of immigrants from former Yugoslavia, from Latin America, and things like that. And it deals with little crimes, with drugs, with money laundering. So is an aspect, and each film, the first 2 at least, were directed by young directors who came from immigrant families. So they had a completely different view on the society and they were living in. And yes, they are fast, they are well edited and well made back actually. And so this is what, when I'm saying we do this, because it's an interesting experience, and it's a pity that it doesn't goes into the cinemas as we would love to see them.
So Raymond, you're also a producer, but I would like to address myself to you and your capacity as a programmer, because when you program, you're looking for these kind of films, right?
Yeah, I mean, like we showed Snabba Cash, Easy Money in Hong Kong, for example, and we usually show a lot of like genre films because Scandinavian genre films is very popular, you know, and even in Asia, because, you know, like for example, Headhunters by Morten Tidlum, he directed The Imitation Game now from, you know, so basically he suddenly went to Hollywood, and, you know, of course, you know, like all these, you know, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo and all these things. I mean, they're just very popular and, you know, like around the world. I mean, these films basically just show, and then they were bought by Hong Kong companies. They were, you know, shown on TV. So I mean, you know, like I think Scandinavian genre is just in some ways is its own kind of private world, because, you know, they just do things so well. You know, like I'm not really sure how, but yeah, they always like just really slick and really smartly made, and a lot of them didn't go to Hollywood, and then they don't make bad films, unlike German directors who go to Hollywood. I'm sorry.
So, and Essin, I mean, so we've had kind of the production side, the programming side, and then from the critical perspective, do you feel that you find enough or the same amount of space in magazines, newspapers, whatever outlet you have, to discuss genre films such as this one? And do you feel like, or do you need special tactics to write about them?
In Turkey, actually, unfortunately, the only cultural arts magazines are getting shut down. I know the film criticism having big problem everywhere else, but in Turkey with this government, the cultural art is going down. So I can't compare with the genre. But if you go a few years back, yes, unfortunately, genre films are always less important. I mean, I am also a programmer for Istanbul Film Festival. We try to find, nice special screenings, especially midnight screenings. The great genre film, sometimes 2 films back to back. It's like, editors are not very much willing to, have a larger space for genre movies because, they just.
Does it have anything to do with the fact that there's also like a great fan culture around genre films, and that it's perhaps either taken less seriously or that people find that these films will find their own niche and don't need other kinds of criticism?
I think it's now it's a kind of, yes, it's a cult thing. I mean, it's a genre movie. It's always been, the subculture production, at least in Turkey. So it's now in the internet time. It's getting more bigger and bigger and bigger because of the cult figure. Is very much, it goes with the internet's technology. So please.
Oh, but okay. I no.
Sorry, I thought you were.
No. I mean, I could say something. But
No, I thought you were saying.
No, I mean, switching hats a little bit because, as it was mentioned, I am also a producer of films, and my last film actually was shown on ZDF. Thank you. So it's called Headshot, and that was a genre film. And the thing is, the unfortunate thing a little bit about Asian cinema nowadays, especially in the Western world, is that if you're not a genre film and you're not a well-known directors who go into the A-list festivals, it's really hard to sell your films. Because nowadays, basically, like Asian cinema has become reduced a lot to basically being, we just want like genre films, and it's very difficult because basically, it's, there is a certain, lack of interest in Asian cinema nowadays, especially in the Western side. Whether it be even like distribution or even on TV, and so we do a lot of times have to make films that are genrefied just so that basically it actually would travel overseas. And it's not a bad thing per se, because luckily I do like genre films, and my directors, they also are working with within the genre, because one of my directors is a Thai director called Penek Ratanarong. So he did Last Life in the Universe and things like that. And so I mean, my next film is is also a genre film. But I mean, there is a certain awareness that, of course, we are doing this because we are basically of course, it's going to be seen by more people, but at the same time, it's also something that the director really does like to do. So I mean, there is, but there is an unfortunate side of basically the making Asian films that you have to be aware of. Yeah.
This is also the way I grew up with, my image of Asian film when I grew up was basically completely designed by genre cinema. I was watching Hong Kong kung fu films all the time when I was small, and actually, I think this is one of the lovely things about genre cinema, that we all kind of have a relation to it because they are so accessible. So when you grow up, it's one of the most accessible forms of film. At least that's my opinion. Please battle me if you have a different opinion. So I think we were switching hats a lot, but if we take off all our hats, what are your relationships to genre, or your relationships to genre film? Did you grow up with it? Did you watch action films all of your childhood time, or you don't like genre at all? Probably you wouldn't be here. But yeah, what do you guys think, independently of your profession?
I used to. Sorry, you go ahead. I mean, I love genre movies. I did when I was, in my teenage years, I watch all the horrors. You know, it's because you just want to see blood. In this age, just whatever whose is blood doesn't import. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but I also, you know, love Chinatown. You know, it's wonderful. But comparing with these days, the corruption and everything was the same. If you compare with the genre movies now, nothing has changed. I mean, something's changed, but the genre movies, they don't change somehow. But now I think that things are getting worse. Beforehand, at least, you know, Philip Marlowe as the detective at the end, or Humphrey Bogart, he was loser, but he was just a loser. At the end, he could just, you know, have his whiskey and then the cigarettes, and then left alone. But now they got killed. It's just no time for just, you know, feel sorry for yourself. Yeah, you don't even have, you know, right to sorry for yourself. You just got killed. So is this something different? Please go ahead. I can talk forever. So you were having...
Unlike you, I never was really a fan of kung fu movies. I never watched them. I found them
You missed so much.
simply boring in a way, except very few. And my experience with Asian films is unfortunately more arty, you know, less commercial, at least from our point of view, like Japanese cinema, Ozu, Mitsugushi, or Kurosawa. And maybe it's a question of generation, I don't know. But Asian cinema, I mean, the popular Asian cinema from Hong Kong, something you can't watch it. And I mean, the Western audience, for the Western audience, it's, in my personal opinion, it's, you know, unwatchable in a way. Commercial cinema, the real commercial cinema. And the kung fu films at the time, I mean, and nowadays it's all direct to video here. You know, you don't see it in the cinema. It's a side market. It's a niche market here in Germany, at least, and in other countries. Of course, they are masterpieces like Touch of Zen, for example. And King Hu is a great director, no doubt about that. But I have a different perspective on Asian cinema than that commercial.
But do you feel, I mean, since we're here also with critics and people who have an interest in criticism, do you feel that perhaps those kind of films need a specific kind of criticism or critics that can serve as ambassadors, and that perhaps critics are not doing that well enough?
You mean for that kind of commercial cinema?
No, for the more transgressive kind of genre cinema.
Actually, I think, I don't know. I think the people who like to see these films are not necessarily, I'm sorry to say that, read critics. They are fans, and you know, they have special forums to get these informations, and they follow it, you know, and there are publications and the internet, whatever. So, no, I don't think you need to be. You're not missing out something as a critic in not promoting these kind of films, I would say.
But would the cinema benefit from it?
No. Not in my point of view. I'm sorry. I mean, it's interesting. It's like, I mean, we have in Germany here. You might, well, we Germans know, we have every summer we have a tour. It's called Fantasy Film Festival. It's in the major cities with different films. And as in the different cities it's not always the same program. You have fans who follow this festival just to catch these films which were not shown in Frankfurt but shown in Munich, or vice versa. So yes, there's a group, there's a community for that, but that it's, you know, it's there for once in the summer on a tour. It's not really something which I would say it's. It doesn't interest me. Let's put it that way.
Okay, we have a question over here, and also I really want to invite once again everybody in the audience to sort of jump in. But let's start here.
It's not actually a question.
Remarks are fine as well.
Yeah, the mic is down, I guess. So it's more. I'm a little bit
wondering why Meinhof, as someone working for the public television, is so much promoting questions of market pragmatism when you're talking about we don't care what the critics do about genre films because anyway it's not going to change anything for genre film because there are fans. And Fantasy Film Fest, we all know, is a trade show, is a very commercial initiative to promote films that already have a distributor, so it doesn't work in favor of transgressive genre cinema. It has given up its retrospectives, it has given up its actually culture of genre cinema. And I'm wondering why you kind of seem so. I mean, I'm probably misreading what you're saying, but it kind of sounds like you're content with that, and like, well, that's the situations. The fans are gonna find out about the genre films, and that's just enough. And I don't think we should agree with whatever. If the genre cinema is not strong in cinemas, there might be some reasons to it, and it might not be only because there's enough genre on television. I don't think that would be an answer to that question, as if you could satisfy a cinematic need through television substitutes. I don't think so.
Well, well, first I have to say, of course, I appreciate the word of critics, because the films we are involved in usually are they are favorites of the critics and the festival. So I'm very pleased about that, I have to say, and the films are worth being criticized and reviewed and seen by the audience. And so whatever helps a film being seen due also to favorite critics, I'm really happy. You get me? And yes, I'm working for TV. That's right. But I guess I hope my horizon is a little bit larger than that. So I'm trying to think strategic in a way. I want these films to be seen. I want these films we are involved in, other films of quality, not just our films, to be seen on big screens and on small screens later as well. And this is changing dramatically, so we have to think about that, how to bring these films in to an audience. The audience of genre films is very specific. You don't need, from my point of view, from my position, we don't need to do anything particular. They find their films, and it's always will be limited. There's a limited release of all these films, and I mean all these splatter films. There's not a blockbuster as usually, in the splatter films. They have an audience who likes to see blood all the time. Personally, I don't. But and there, I think it's a waste of time for a critic. I mean, to invest an intellectual energy to promote or to discuss these films. Is my point of view. That is a business. It's purely business. I mean, film is business, and in this business there are some peaks which are, I don't like the word art house, but which produce, the peaks are, like the cream on top of it. It's quality. We're talking about ambition. We talk about visions. We talk, something serious to say, a really important matter in a way. It doesn't need to be serious all the time. Of course, it can be funny, it can be dramatic, it can be a genre, but it has to be that, and that is important. There is also the role of the critics is important. The rest is purely business. You make money, you don't make money. That's all.
But why couldn't it be the opposite? Why, if you have a publicly funded TV system, why couldn't quality be the base and the cream would be commercial? Why does the business have to be on the base and the quality only the cream?
I'll give you this is not Meinhof, of course, but I just wanted to add, because as I program for quite a few festivals, like for example, the Hong Kong Film Festival. Even as a festival, and Hong Kong is also partly funded by the government, for example, I sometimes watch films that I really like this film, it's really nice, I'm not going to program it. Why? Because maybe 5 people would come and see this film. Because the thing is, you have to know your audience. And the thing is, sometimes you cannot program a film and expect an non-existing audience. No matter how much I promote this film, I know people are not going to go and see it. And that's the reality, because the thing is, you have to know what your market is, and basically, like, and unfortunately, sometimes you have a certain limitation. I program some films that I don't necessarily even like, but I know that the audience will go and see it. And the thing is, it's always a balance. Sometimes I have to show films that is for the audience, and sometimes I have to show films that I personally like. But it's ultimately, it's kind of similar, because it is a business, because ultimately we need to have a certain amount of box office to keep the festival going. And if I just show films that I personally really like, but the thing is, like, I know that not many people are gonna watch it, and I keep on pushing those, in the end, basically, the festival is gonna go bankrupt. And the thing is, you have to realize that basically, like, no matter what, it is a business, and there's only a certain amount of things you can do, even though you may want to show a certain film.
But if we were speaking from an ideal world, I mean, because in
But
the
it's
end
not.
it all comes down to money, and then I guess we're gonna be very depressed before the evening ends. But
That's
there's also something like audience building, and I think being a commissioning editor at a television station, or being a programmer, or being a critic also has kind of a moral responsibility in audience building. So I'd rather hear your thoughts on that than the fact that we need box office and marketing and other stuff.
Of
There's
course, you
also
have, of course, you have heard about the sandwich concept of doing a festival. So programming some really commercial and prospective box office films, and to program also the other films.
Oh yeah, we show extremely art house films. We show Tom Anderson, and basically, like, James Benning, like extremely quiet, like non-moving, like, art house experimental films, because we like them, and we know that there are going to be 25 people to go and watch a James Benning film, but we keep on doing it. But the thing is, there's a certain finite amount of films I can show in this kind of type. And the thing is, that's the reality, because the thing is, you have to keep the festival going. If you don't have a festival, then there is no festival. And the thing is, like, you have to think of the audience. And of course, there are commercial films you have to program. And I'm sure in a lot of ways, a TV station is the same. You have to basically also think of these things, because if you don't have a certain amount of audience watching it, that everything suffers. I mean, even though we're publicly funded, we still need to basically continue going, because the thing is, like, there's a certain limit of what we can do. And of course, I'm running around telling everybody to go to watch a James Benning film, like 13 skies, and people are like, what the hell did you just tell me? It was like 13 pictures of basically skies. But the thing is, I love that film. But the thing is, how many people am I going to convince to go and watch that film? Very, very few.
Okay, but since we're here also talking about sort of criticism as activism, maybe before we lose everybody in the audience, we could do a final round and ask all three of you about your positive strategies in how you bring films, for instance, like the one we just saw, or similar films. What is your special effort in bringing them to an audience? And of course, we all understand the fine specifics of the market and the economy, but I think that's not really what we're interested in. So what are your special strategies and your tricks to do the impossible? And maybe not talk about James Benning, which is a genre filmer in himself, but maybe kind of bring it back to the kind of films we were talking about. Essine, would you like to start?
Wow,
have
double
two
microphone, right? The Istanbul Film Festival, we depend on the ticket sale, but also we have the ready audience. So we have, we are good, so far. So we try to show as many as possible. Because as a film critic, I believe that we go double standard. What about Kill Bill? It's hugely successful, critically acclaimed. But if you look at the Kill Bill by Tarantino, it's just a genre film. It's just, reinventing the popular culture's specific. We all know what I mean. So we should maybe dig deep. I believe that I agree with you, about how they target B movies, target the audience, and they get the pleasure ready, blah blah. But I still believe that it's an underground thing. You could do many things. So I love it. It's just, you know, I think there should be space for it, and we should, you know.
So I hear a key word in your response, which is pleasure. So maybe we shouldn't shy away about talking about pleasure. Or guilty pleasure, and maybe not so Catholic about
Guilty.
it. So Raymond, what is your kind of secret strategy?
Well, I make genre films. I produce genre films. I like genre films. You know, so actually, like, I have no problem with genre films. And the thing is, the kind of genre films I produce still manage to go to, you know, to the big festivals. And to me, there is actually a beauty of making a genre film and transcending it, playing with it, being inventive with it, and basically, like, you know, like, because the great horror films of the 70s, you know, basically they were actually like social commentaries.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that I really like, because I like a genre film that actually like says something about the world, that basically like plays around with its basically structure. And these kinds of films is no longer just a genre film, but actually that is actually something greater. And that, to me, these kinds of films are very much worth popularizing and also defending, and also these are, to me, basically, like, you know, just as good as basically any film that wins the Oscars. So to me, I like genre films, but of course, if we're talking about basically extremely B-movie type, of course, you know, basically there's no point in really going into them. But there are a lot of people who do push the envelope in terms of basically making genre films and having things to say, and basically knowing the techniques and knowing the genre enough to basically like subvert it.
We're getting 3 P's here. We're getting pleasure, pushing, and Meinhof. What is your...
Mine is guilty pleasure. In a way, what I do, I co-produce films which are different, and I buy films which are also different. Right now, I'm buying, that is a really particular subgenre. I'm buying a Japanese nunsploitation film. So you talked about Catholicism, so I will be crucified, I guess, because it takes place in a Catholic convent of nuns in Japan, which don't exist usually. But yes, so I like that.
So we have some pleasure, some guilty pleasure, and some pushing. So in the end, it all comes down to resistance. Unless there are really important questions from the audience, now is the time. Otherwise, we will see you at the bar.
Yeah, we should have a drink.
And it was a pleasure, and not even a guilty one, to be talking to all of you and to have you in our attendance. So, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
I don't know. Pins and needles. Yeah. Could be. Thank you. I didn't even have a chance to sort of introduce myself.